Hello guys, welcome to our next video. I'm from the Salesforce Traders team, and in this session we're gonna be taking a look at a brief introduction at how Lightning Web Components work apart from the Aura framework. So in our last video we went over the Lightning data service for the Aura framework, but this video is the last video in our series, and this will give you guys just a brief little introduction on what LWC is all about. How do you do the basic setup in order to develop LWC components? So Lightning Web Components, or LWC, is another framework that was uh, brought forward by Salesforce a couple of months, or I think last year, that was 2019. And it is an alternative to the standard Aura framework that we use to develop Lightning components. Both of these are supposed to coexist at the same time. That is what Salesforce has suggested. So in the future, we're going to have applications or orgs which have both the Aura components and Lightning components working together. And another reason or another advantage of Aura components, of Lightning Web Components, is that they are moving in a direction of following other frameworks like Angular. They want it to be modular and resemble Angular at a high level form. Not necessarily Angular, but React has the stuff as well. So, but for now, the most important advantage of LWC is that it mostly runs on base JavaScript, and it allows easily using other third-party scripts. But before we even get it to creating LWC or web components, we need to know that unlike the standard Aura components, as of now, there is no direct way to create a Lightning Web component from your developer console. In order to create a Lightning Web component, you need to do two things. The first is you need to install the Salesforce CLI. CLI stands for the command line interface, and it is a command line language provided by Salesforce to do certain things. Like, it also helps in deployment and stuff, and one of its features is to allow creation of a Lightning Web component. The second step after installation of the CLI is to set up the VS Code IDE, because that is the only IDE right now which supports the CLI, and in turn which supports creation of the Lightning Web components. So you can go to our website, and in the Salesforce Lightning tab, you can go to the Lightning Web Component section, and in here you'll find the instructions to install the CLI based on your system, that is on Windows, on Linux, and on other systems as well. So on Mac as well. It's pretty simple. You shouldn't face any issues, but we've had some issues in the past with this, so most of you guys have to reach out to Salesforce support, or you can check out forums as well for that, but mostly it's going to be a really simple process. Once you have installed this CLI, you should be able to go to your terminal and check the version by this SFDX version command. After you have installed SFDX CLI, the next step is installing Visual Studio. Visual Studio is another based on your system or operating system, but it's really easy. Again, there is a download link which is there on the website. You can go to that link and download VS Code for your system. But once you have installed both the CLI and your Visual Studio, and you open the Visual Studio, it's going to look like something like this. So the first thing after you have installed both of those things is you need to go to extensions and search for Salesforce, and you'll see an extension called Salesforce Extension Pack. So I have installed it already, but you guys should be able to see this install link here. And once you install this, it'll add certain extensions to your VS Code, which would be helpful for you to create web components with or just run your Salesforce integration with. If you haven't used any IDE beforehand before using VS Code, I suggest you just go with VS Code because it is the best IDE right now. It used to be Eclipse a while back, but now your VS Code is the in my opinion, the best IDE to use with Salesforce. I mean, rest is like whatever works for you. So once you have installed these instructions on the website to install the extensions as well, all of it is right there. So now, once we have installed the extensions as well, now we need to move. How do we connect our Salesforce org to our VS Code so that we can start building out the web components by the VS Code? So the first command that you need to run is SFDX create project, and in your VS Code you can click on, you can press Control plus Shift plus P, and that will bring up this little box over here, and you can search for whatever command you want. So we're gonna run the create project command right here. I'm gonna click on it, and it's gonna ask me for a name, and it's gonna ask me what type of project I want to create. So you just want to go with standard, and for the project name, I'm gonna say, I think I just need to add standard, and then now it asks me for the project name, so I'm just gonna go Salesforce Drillers, and now it asks me where I want to create it, so I'm just gonna create it on my desktop. So now you see that our project has been created, and our project has been created right here. It's called Salesforce Trailers. You will see it has the stuff inside of it. So now you'll see this folder here called force-app. So this is the main folder which will have all the stuff from your Lightning org. It hasn't been linked to a Lightning org yet, but once we link it to an Salesforce org, you'll see all these folders are populated with your stuff from your Lightning org, or your Salesforce org. So let's now link it to an Salesforce org since we have created the project. And the way you do that is you need to run the second command, which is SFDX authorize an org. This one. So I'm gonna go here again. I'm gonna press Control plus Shift plus B, and you see here is this command. I think so I'm gonna do SFDX, this one, authorize an org, and then it asks you for what type of org is it. Is it a production? Is it a sandbox? So we're just gonna go project default since we're gonna link it with a developer org. And then it asks me for an org alias. This is a way for VS Code to keep track of how many orgs you have linked. You can obviously link multiple orgs as well. So an alias will be a common unique name which will refer to this particular org in your VS Code. So I'm going to say SFDR dev. I think they messed up the stuff again. Let me do that again. I'm going to do SF drillers dev. I'm going to click enter. Now, and then you can enter the credentials of your org right here. So I'm going to enter the credentials of our org. And I'm going to click on login. So it asks you if you want to allow access with the CLI. So you click on allow. And now our setup should be done in here. And you can say it says SFDX authorize an org ran successfully. So now our project is successfully linked with our Salesforce org. And now we can create a new web component right here, and that should go on to our org from here. I mean, there are like other commands here as well. Like you want to uh, fetch stuff from your org to here, because right now none of these folders are populated. So you can do that as well, but that's like a conversation for a separate video. But for now, let us concentrate on creating our first web component from VS Code and push it to our org. So now the next command you need to run is SFDX create lightning web component. So I'll go here. I'm gonna control plus shift plus P, and I'm gonna do SFDX create lightning web component. Then you need to enter the name for your component. We're just gonna go with my first LWC component. And then it asks you what directory, I mean in this folder directory, where do you wanna use it from, but so we're just gonna use the normal one. So now you see our web component was created. So you can see this is the web component. And now I can open this out right here. So the whole structure of web components is a little bit different from your Aura components. They just have one HTML file, one JS file right here, and then the third thing is the meta.xml file, which stores some information about the component, like what version it is, if it can be used on a record page, and stuff like that. So we're not going to go into too much detail about how Lightning Web Components work, but I'm going to give you guys a brief overview, and that is, so all your markup is stored in your HTML file right here, this one. You'll have all the markup that you want to put on the page, and then this JS file will have all the JS functions that you want. So you'll see the first line in your JS file says import lightning element from LWC. So this import statement is the crux of your JavaScript in your web components, since you need to import each and everything that you want to use in your Lightning Web Components. If you want to use any Apex class method, you need to import that separately. Usually when you work in a real web component, you'll see like multiple import statements in your JS file. All right, now as to how the actual markup works. So Lightning Web Components also work off attributes, just like Aura components. You can define your attributes in your JS and then use them on your HTML. So one change here is in your Aura components, you have to define your attributes in your markup. That is not the case in the case of the components. You can define all the attributes in your JS file. So let us go ahead and create our first component. So we're going to use the sample code from the website to create our component. So, and here is the first one. And I'll just fix some issues with it. So let's remove the humding errors. Yeah. So now it is saved properly. And we're just gonna do some formatting. Click on Ctrl plus S to save it. So you see this is our markup, and all markup in your Lightning Web Components resides between these template tags. And then you see this text merge field there. This is how merge fields work in your web components, and this is different from your Aura component, because in there you have two kind of merge fields, two kind of expressions, the bound and unbound. But that is not the case for your web components. Now I'll show you guys what the JavaScript looks like. So obviously we're still gonna have stuff like importing the standard lightning element from LWC. Then here is where our attribute definition goes. So the great thing about web components is, you just have this second line in here which says export default class hello world, and this extends our lightning element. So this hello world acts as like our JavaScript controller. And so you can see we have defined this text attribute in here. And the great thing about Lightning is you don't need to specify any type. What value assigned into this text, that dictates what type this attribute is going to be. So we just define it as my first component, and here is where the text is. And also this text is bound to a Lightning input here as well, right? So that is also the case. And then the second thing is, you see this OnChange method call right here. It says OnChange equal to OnChange, and you see we have a method defined here called OnChange. So a major difference between Aura components and web components is that, so we just discussed that there are like no bound and unbound expressions. So basically all attribute references in your markup work like unbound expressions in web components, where we need to run an onChange method in order to update the value of my text attribute in my JavaScript. It will not be automatically updated since it is bound to this input field, just like it would in your Aura components. So I hope that makes sense, guys, but let's go forward. So once we do this, and the third step that we're going to do is, since we want to use this web component in our org to preview it, there is no application concept in web components. You can't really preview a Lightning web component unless you put it on an actual page with your app builder. And in order to put it on an actual page, you need to add certain definitions in the meter.xml file, which tells the framework that this web component can be used on a Lightning page. And that is gonna be right here. So like this. I just need to fix all these dashes since that's gonna mess up the formatting. Just give me a sec. The encoding is UTF-8. This is pretty generic stuff once you get used to it. So yeah. So now what happened here is, there is the API version, there is the is exposed equal to true. This parameter dictates if this web component will be available or not to the user if we put it in a managed package. It can be used internally in our code, but if you put is exposed equal to true, it can also be used in the managed package by a subscriber. Then here is what we added. So in the targets XML part, here is where you specify where all you want to use this web component from. I specified lightning underscore homepage. So now this web component can be used with any lightning homepage in my org. So I've saved this as well with Ctrl+S. But what you'll see is this all is saved on my local system as of now. So I need to save this into my org by sending it out with the CLI. And so you do that by running this command, SFDX deploy source to org, and you can just run that by right clicking in here and running this command, deploy this source to org. So that runs our command right here. It is running. And it says that deploy source to org successfully ran. So that means this web component has now been created in our Lightning application. So let's check this out if it shows up or not. So let me go to any of my home pages. Let's say we're going to use the home page for the service app, the standard service app. So now we'll go here. You see we've already added some Aura components on this page based on our previous videos, but let's click here and click on edit page and just open the app builder. And in here, you should see your web component showing up right here. So now you can grab it and drop it right here with your Aura components. Click on save and then go back. And as you can see, our web component showed up here. And again, as soon as I change my web component right here, it changes the value based on the code that we did right here. So again, let's say we want to change our code a little bit and we put an alert in here. And this alert prints out the value, whatever I put inside my component, right? So now you want to push this change into your org. So again, you go and click on deploy this source to org. Again, it ran fine. So now go back, refresh your page, and now the changes that you made in the code should be reflected here. So now I'll just change it, and you see now I'll get an alert every time I change the component. So very simple, guys. This is how you develop web components. It's a lot simpler than Aura components actually, when you just get a grasp of having everything in a single JavaScript file. And that's it for this session. This was an introduction to how Lightning Web Components work, and I hope you guys will maybe see a detailed look in Lightning Web Components in a future series. So I hope you guys enjoyed the session and keep learning.